The issue of trust is perhaps one of the most essential of all of the topics that we have within our reflection on what leadership is about. Because without trust, we know that there is no bond between those who lead and those who collaborate with those who lead. And we know that without trust, even formal authority is not sufficient to serve in terms of leadership. That trust is, in many ways, it's the currency that's so essential for leadership. And we also know that in our context within the church today, that trust has been compromised in very, very critical ways because of the sexual abuse crisis in the church and the way it's been managed. So not only is leadership an essential quality, or trust an essential quality for leadership, it is essential we as a church learn to regenerate trust in our institutions. And in a conversation this morning with Cardinal Mark Ouellet, who is the prefect of the Synod of Bishops, we discussed how this question of the abuse crisis and the way that it has shaken the confidence in the authority and the moral integrity of the church has required of us a response to look for ways of healing and restoring it. Trust, which is so fragile, it takes a long time to build, and it can so quickly be undermined and betrayed. So we're really grateful for our speaker today, Professor Bob Bies from Georgetown's McDonough School, who is a professor of leadership and management. And as you know, Bob is a contributor to our English-speaking course. He was part of our pilot program, and it's a great pleasure to have him here for our webinar today.
Bon pomeriggio, buenas tardes, good afternoon. I'm Bob Bies from Georgetown University, as David mentioned. Today, we're going to focus in on creating cultures of trust and collaboration. At any point in time, if you have questions, please stop me. Raise your hand, do whatever you need to do to get my attention, because I'm here for you, okay? I'm here for you. So let me begin here. I'll actually share my screen. I became very fluent in Zoom last year, so I'm pretty good at sharing screens. Let's begin here. I want to begin with the wisdom of Warren Buffett, the well-known financier, who said this: trust is like the air we breathe. When it's present, nobody really notices. But when it's absent, everybody notices. I think that puts it into clear context, the issue of trust, because it is, as David mentioned, it's the fundamental social currency of leadership and institutions. If you don't have trust, it's real hard to accomplish mission. You need trust. So I want to begin with a little reflection. What are the indicators? I want you to do this individually, and then I want you to report out to the larger group. So here's the reflection question. What are indicators or signs signaling the presence and absence of trust on a team or in an institutional setting? What are those indicators of the presence or absence of trust? I mean, Buffett was suggesting about present and absent. What are those indicators? How do you know that there is no trust or there is trust? So spend 5 minutes reflecting. Give me some examples, and then we'll share that with the larger group. Wow, you guys are really good. your examples of the presence of trust. I mean, as I go through this list here, in the very beginning, the distrust or the lack of trust, shallow level communication, Benedict mentions. Maria Elena, possibility to laugh together. I like that, laugh together. Spontaneity in sharing or commenting, joy in going out. That word joy is in several people's comments when there's a presence of trust. Freedom to offer one's gifts and talents. Trust brings the capacity to collaborate. That will be a key message today. Trust leads to collaboration. Absence of trust in us versus them mentality. Blame and suspicion. Lebanon's a good example. There's other countries in this world, including the one that I reside in, where that exists. Presence, enjoyment, difficulties to reach agreement. I like that. Cynical attitude. Presence of trust, open dialogue, gossiping or backbiting. Oh yeah, absolutely. Greater openness and sharing. That's a great example of trust. Wary of words to say. There is silence or evading presence of others. Absolutely. Presence of mutual, again, joy, absence, taking back, talking back at the person, high sensitivity in the relationships. Fear to say the truth openly. We're going to come to that. Many silos. I'm glad that Benedict picked silos. I'm glad that Ernesto and all picked different things, Mirasol. But we're going to talk about silos. Presence of trust, generosity, and collaboration. Vulnerability, yeah. We can share from the heart, many written rules, no space of creativity. Yeah, the more rules you have, the less trust there is. Okay? The more rules you have, the less trust there is. The more different levels of hierarchy you have to go to get approval signals lack of trust. If the team lets a person go easily, it means that they don't trust the person. Cynicism, delegation of tasks, no need to constant control. Absolutely. This is a lot of great things. Talk to me now, as you've seen all these
Cosas
examples.
maravillosas en esta chat. Entonces, hábleme acerca de su experiencia.
These are incredible lists. I mean, you see it or don't see it. Share more, elaborate more on the presence and absence of trust. These are great, great responses. I'll be quiet. I'll listen to you.
So feel free to unmute yourselves, or if you want to raise your hand. And Silvina will make sure that she's translating.
Well, let me ask a question, because you all have put together an incredible list of great examples. What do you see? Are you seeing a growth in trust in your organization? Are you seeing trust decline? What is being done to create trust, which will be an issue we'll get to at the end of this webinar? Do you see a growth in trust or a diminishing of trust? Managing key org paradoxes that build trust, because both and has been part of the Discerning Leadership program. And I'm a believer in both and leadership. And here's a few key paradoxes that you have to manage. You want to be self-reliant, but you also have to trust others, okay? You have to trust others. That's real hard to do sometimes. You want to be tough, because these are challenging times, but you also have to be empathetic and vulnerable. You want to be directive, but you also want to be collaborative. You want to collaborate and co-create. The phrase I use so much today with organizations around the world is collaboration and co-creation, which I think is part of what Pope Francis is calling for, what the Synodal leadership is calling for, collaboration, co-creating. Dare I say, even recreating. But you have to do two things that are sometimes in tension. Here's common barriers to creating cultures of trust and collaboration, many of which you already identified. There's incomplete communication. Communication is going to be a key issue in building trust. I'm going to suggest in a later slide, you want to over-communicate. Okay, you want to over-communicate. There's incomplete communication. Not everybody hears the same thing. If you're a global, it's because many of you are part of this global reach, as Carmen was talking about, not everybody hears the same thing. They hear bits and pieces. And then there is the silo mentality, where people don't talk to each other. There's no communication. In fact, what I would add is, then it's secrecy. You don't share. That only creates a barrier to trust. Then there's inconsistent messages. Somebody in one part of the organization says this, somebody says that. In times of uncertainty and change, which is your world, people really pay attention to what leaders say. And if there's inconsistent messages, then people are gonna, it's a barrier to trust. Who do you trust? In fact, I will suggest to you, the more important the issue, the more you want people reading from the same script. Same script, because people are paying attention. They get on their iPhones or their Androids and, what did you hear? Did you hear the same thing? Inconsistent standards. People really pay attention. Are they treated the same in terms of the allocation of resources or the imposing of burdens? The fear of being judged. That came up in many of your examples. The fear of being judged. People feeling excluded. And then there's rumors in a vacuum. The two conditions that give rise to rumors are no information, important issue. If it's an important issue and there's no information, people try to make sense of it. Rumors start to fly. And people share the rumors. They go viral. Those are common barriers to creating cultures of trust and collaboration, many of which you already identified. But what I want to do is give you practical strategies. And to set that up, here's a quotation from Deming, the quality guru, who said this: trust is mandatory for the optimization of any system. It's true of a production system. It's true of a human system. I mean, to go to Sandra's example, if there's no trust, it's real hard to get to peace. If there's no trust, it's real hard to work together. You need trust. So let's talk about practical strategies for creating a culture of trust. Now, you all, if not all of you, have had the benefit of being with my dear colleague, Janine Turner, who focuses on different ways to listen. But I tell Janine, the single most important leadership skill and trust building skill is listening. Why is listening the most important leadership and trust building skill? Because when you listen to people, they tell you lots of stuff. But also, to go back what we were talking earlier with Carlos, people feel valued and important when you listen to them. The model is create a dialogue, not a monologue. I think that's what Synodal leadership in part is about, a dialogue, not a monologue. But listening is the single most important leadership skill. And it is hard to listen. And Professor Turner walked you through the steps to become an even better listener. As I said earlier, people want to be seen. People want to be heard. People want to be understood. It's a fundamental human need around the world. And that creates respect, which is key to building trust. But part of creating trust practical strategy is you have to demonstrate awareness of others and what's going on in the environment. You had a session with Professor Boyatzis talking about emotional and social intelligence, resonant leadership. It's all about paying attention. Do you see what's going on within your team, within your organization? And the more you pay attention and aware that people know that you're aware of what's going on, that you're not on your own little silo, the more willing to trust you. But it's also about being visible and accessible. Do they see you? Are you accessible? Can they reach you? Carmen was talking about the networking and the virtual world and all that sort of stuff. You're visible and accessible. I don't think Zoom's going to leave us because it allows us to do certain things. I mean, I'm teaching in person with my mask on. I prefer to be in person, but there's things I do in executive education programs is via Zoom. Even this webinar is via Zoom. But you want to be visible and accessible. People can reach you. Share information. That's a way of creating a culture of trust. Because here's the insight from the research, of which I've done some on. It's the less you say, the more likely you will be misinterpreted. The less you say. Because it then gives rise to rumors. What is she hiding? What is he hiding? Say more, share information. Communicate often and in many forums. It could be in a meeting, it could be in an email, but communicate often. As one executive said to me, she said to me, Bob, one of the most important things is C cubed. And I go, wow, C cubed, what's that? Because I always ask simple, dumb questions, one of my core competencies. So I say, what do you mean by C cubed? And she said, crystal clear communication. So I asked her, what do you mean by crystal clear communication? And she said this, simple words. Use 1 or 2 syllable words. Don't use big words, simple words. And then repeat, repeat, repeat. Particularly if you're going through times of change, a new approach called Synodal leadership, you've got to repeat it. There's new words, new language. You've got to repeat it over and over so people understand it. Create transparency of process. Do people know what they will be judged by? What are the criteria? Transparency is critical. As David alluded to in the sex abuse crisis, the whole transparency about how it's been handled. Transparency is a condition before a decision. After a decision, we call it an explanation. But people need to know what they're being judged by. They need to know what's going on if they're going to trust. If they only see outcome, they want transparency. When initiating change, explain how it serves the mission. Always tie it back to the mission. Because the very short article that I sent you, 2 pages, because I have a decision rule in assigning articles. If I'm here in the States, I say it's the 1 latte rule. When I'm in Roma, I say it's the 1 cappuccino rule. If it takes longer than 1 cappuccino to read the article, it's too long. And the article is two pages long. But the article is about a shared purpose drives collaboration. It's the power of the why, how it serves the mission. You have that shared purpose. It builds trust. How do you build a culture of collaboration? As we move towards our next exercise to tap into your wisdom. Practice inclusive leadership. One of the ways you build this culture is proactively seek out people, invite input for everyone, and respond supportively to others' inputs. Proactively invite input from everyone, and respond supportively to others' inputs. That's inclusive leadership. Create psychological safety, which went to many of the issues that were raised in your chat responses. Psychological safety has become a big buzzword around the world in terms of a concept. You want to create an environment so people feel safe to voice opinions, thoughts, or ideas without fearing they'll be judged. So what does that mean for you as a leader? You want to support dissenting viewpoints. People's viewpoints are a little different. You want to support them. I was doing work with a large international nonprofit, and they were coming up with their strategic plan for the next 5 years. And one of the executives, she raised an issue, and everybody started jumping all over how they couldn't do it. This is what I call killer phrases. It was wrong. They couldn't do it. And the CEO said, whoa, time out. Let's give her 10 minutes. Free from any criticism. She got to present her ideas. At the end of the strategic planning process, they were adopting her ideas. You have to create a safe harbor to support dissenting viewpoints, because the dissenting viewpoints may become the prevailing or received viewpoint going forward. So create that psychological safety for people, and that's your role as leaders. Break down the silos. You all talked about silos. Break down those silos. One of the ways when I work with organizations, religious organizations, nonprofits, business, governmental agencies, one of the things that we do is we create teams, and they can be ad hoc about a specific issue, or it can be ongoing with members across the institution. We're sharing information and identifying problems, opportunities, and solutions. You have to create a structure that encourages collaboration. And this is one that does it, because that leads to collaboration and co-creation. So you have to create a mechanism for people to come together to break down those silos. Practice conversational intelligence. This gets to some of the issues that Professor Turner raised in creating a culture of dialogue. I'm a big believer in conversational intelligence. I mean, you have to understand that it's through conversations and how those conversations are interpreted can build trust. And you want to begin to ask questions for discovery and collaboration rather than judging. So for example, I'm not the expert in these things. What do you think? So you're inviting collaboration. People are more willing to trust that if you invite it. Here are our key challenges right now. What ideas do you have to tackle them? Again, you're trying to discover as part of collaboration. Or the last one, which may seem almost impossible in the world we live in. I know it's true at Georgetown. If we had unlimited resources and no limitations, what should we do? Now, I know you don't have unlimited resources, and I know you have limitations. But if you just play with that in an imagination, because part of collaboration and co-creation is imagination. And in your world, a moral imagination. How can we become better in serving the people, serving the church, serving the mission? Celebrate. One of the ways you create that culture of collaboration is celebrate successful collaborations. Over the last 18 months, there have been successful collaborations. Otherwise, you wouldn't be where you are today. Celebrate those. Share the stories, because they always require teamwork and resilience. And when you celebrate those successful collaborations, sometimes people say, oh, I didn't know about that. So you're informing them, oh. But also what it does is creates a culture of pride. A culture of pride that we're doing it against some of the greatest odds. You always have challenges, but the last 18 months have added to the difficulty of the challenges. So celebrate. Express gratitude and appreciation. How often have we said thank you? That builds collaboration. Express gratitude and appreciation. Those are practical strategies for collaboration. Another piece of sage wisdom. This is one of my two favorite proverbs. You'll get the second one at the end. This is a Japanese proverb. None of us is as smart as all of us. That's a profound insight about leadership, culture of collaboration and trust, and innovation. None of us is as smart as all of us. So now what I want to do is tap into your wisdom. Because if I believe, as a Japanese proverb says, none of us is as smart as all of us, what I want you to do is spend 5 minutes reflecting. You can put this, into the chat box if you'd like. But I want you to identify examples of successful trust building and collaboration and why you think they occurred. And then Pablo, because he has the power, will send you to breakout rooms. Okay, how about some reporting out? Give us, what did you learn? Here's some examples.
Yeah. One interesting point I heard from my colleagues in sharing is when there is a dissent in our collaborative dialogue, if there is a dissent, not to retaliate or instead encourage dissent and the tempers go down.
Right. That's a great insight.
That really, I really appreciated the sharing of one of my colleagues. That really helpful. Then another one is to make them feel listened to. Helped a lot when a group of collaborators felt that they are listened to. They were ready to go ahead with the project or give a constructive idea which is implementable, and that worked.
Right. That's great. That's a great example. Other examples you want to share with the larger group? Yes, Mirasol.
One thing that came out also kind of similar in our sharing was about the importance of knowing each other, because most of us, we come from communities that are from different cultures. So we may say, we may think that we know each other, but normally we don't. So that creates a lot of misunderstanding, judgment, and all these things. And also when one shared about when you make others, if they're in the decision making or in doing things, when you introduce or you make others to participate, more people are participating, and then you resuscitate more collaboration, participation.
Right. Let me just reinforce that, Mirasol. And everybody you work with, particularly on your team, your organization, you need to not just know them, you need to know their story. And I think that's really important. That goes back to that seen, heard, and understood. If you know their story, that's a really important part of building trust and collaboration. I just wanted to reinforce that. Monica.
Thank you. Well, in my group, we're a group of 3, and one person shared, and I found it caught my attention, how in her team everybody knew, was informed of what each of the other delegations was doing. So there was a very fluid, a communication of information within the team. But at the same time, each one having the autonomy to put their part and to collaborate. I think we had in common, both myself and her, we try and take care of spaces of dialogue, of prayer, of sharing together, of sharing visions, of sharing dreams.
Mm-hmm.
And also this openness to making mistakes, that acceptance. Right. If you make a mistake, also one who's from the dicastery for lay was saying, for example, trusting people that maybe wouldn't be 100% secure, but being happily surprised when they were able to carry through, or perhaps confirming that they weren't really 100% secure, but making that step of trusting the other.
Let me just suggest to you, Monica, I like the fact we make mistakes. I tell my students and my executives, they're not mistakes, they're learning opportunities. They're learning opportunities. And if you view it in that way, that's part of that different mindset. But also I like the fact you focus on shared dreams, because I'll give you a question for all of you. What is your dream of the future church? What is your dream of the future church? Monica, the other Monica.
Monica, you have your,
Yeah. And we, from the examples shared in the group, we saw that in difficult times, we need trust and collaboration, but at the same time, trust and collaboration grows in difficult times. And this gives hope, gives us hope, because usually we try to avoid difficulties, but actually they help us to grow in trust and collaboration.
Ron, that's a great example. It's a great example. Other comments, other examples?
Yes, Carmen.
Yeah, in our group was that the need for space for the benefit of the doubts when we are talking together, and that this implies that people are mature enough, that we have a certain amount of maturity, and then also that it's not a matter of something happening once; it's a matter of starting processes, which can be also include people of different generations, right, and especially those for whom it is the nearest need. You know, what we are talking about is about them. So it's kind of bringing together people.
Let me just, Carmen, you said two things I like the phrase creating space for doubts. That's a nice phrase, a space for doubts. But I also like you brought up the intergenerational issue, because you need the dialogue both for younger people, and most people are younger than me today, but you want the younger people talking to the people who have more experience, but both ways. The intergenerational learning and dialogue is critical to the future of the church or your organization. How do you have that intergenerational conversation? I think that's absolutely true. Other comments? Thank you.
Okay.
Probably,
go ahead.
I was thinking in the sharing was very good, and one idea touched me, that in the trusting process, is a process, you don't wait the others to trust you. You start trusting the others and make the steps and be open and transparent. And that is the best step you as a leader can do.
That requires a lot of courage, Ernesto, to trust in that way. But that is what is needed for leadership. You want to lead by example, and your time is leading by example, and that's a great way to do it. We have it's Anna's screen, but somebody.
Okay. Yeah. In our small group, we had we were with Chanti and Paolo, and three things were mentioned, which probably are very, very important. Number one, more communication, and the communication builds trust. Number two, the personal interest. Two people, like Paolo was sharing, a personal story of being interested in one of his personnel, asking about a particular situation that the person was in. And the person was surprised. In 15 years, nobody asked me about that, about my personal life. And the other aspect was, and our personal sharing was, how we find it important to bring everybody to the level of the president of the organization. That there is not much difference between the president and the leader and the people. In fact, make everybody feel that he's the president of the organization. Right. And breaking that barriers and creating that equality and establishing a level of trust that when something goes wrong, instead of trying to be hidden and everybody tries to throw the buck to somebody else, then the problem is owned, the problem is discussed properly, and the lessons are learned together, embraced, and move forward.
That's great. That's great. Let me, as we come to closure, I want if someone from the Spanish-speaking group could share, maybe Silvina could do some translation, because as you figured out, I barely know English. And so if someone from the Spanish-speaking group could speak, and maybe Silvina could translate, please. Or should I say, por favor?
Just to say, my group was a Spanish-speaking group.
Okay.
Yeah.
So should we move on, or I don't want to exclude anybody. Let me move on here. Sandra's going to lead us in a little exercise at the end. But I want to give you 3 quotations. First off, I want to thank you today for your generosity of both time and wisdom. My wife and I have something we do every night. We always say, what are our 3 moments of joy each and every day? And being with you today is one of my 3 moments of joy. So thank you. Let me give you the final quotations before I pass it over to Sandra. The first is from Stephen Covey, who said this: trust is the glue of life. It's the most essential ingredient in effective communication. The next is from Judith E. Glaser, who's the founder of conversational intelligence and one of the great psychologists of all time. And she wrote this: to get to the next level of greatness depends on the quality of the culture, which depends on the quality of the relationships, which depends on the quality of the conversations. Everything happens through conversations. That's in part what we've been talking about today. That's also in part what Synodal leadership is about. The last piece of wisdom, this is my second favorite proverb, an African proverb. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together.